born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler, who will shepherd my people of Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly, and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, Go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word, that I too may come and worship him. After listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them, until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going to the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. It was raining. It was cold. West Bethlehem was no place for a 12-year-old. So he packed his bags and he headed out to find out what the world's all about. He went to France. He went to Spain. He found love. He found pain. He found stores, so he started to shop. But he had no money, so he got in trouble with the cops. Kids in trouble with the cops from Israel didn't have no home, so he cut his hair and moved to Rome. It was there he met his Irish bride, and they ran a flat on the Lower East Side of Rome, Italy, that is. Music publishers, book binders, Bible belters, money changers, spoon benders, and lots of pretty Italian chicks. Wine was flowing, so were beers. So Jesus found his missing years. So he went to a dance and said, This doesn't move me. He hiked up his pants and he went to a movie. On his 13th birthday, he saw Rebel Without a Cause. He went straight on home and invented Santa Claus, who gave him a gift, and he responded in kind. He gave the gift of love and went out of his mind. You see, him and the wife wasn't getting along, so he took out his guitar and he wrote a song called The Dove of Love Fell Off the Perch. But he couldn't get divorced in the Catholic Church, at least not back then anyhow. Jesus was a good guy, and he didn't need all this stuff. So he discovered the Beatles, recorded with the Stones, and he once opened up a 3-way package in Southern California with old George Jones. The years went by like sweet little days, with babies crying, pork chops, and Beaujolais. When he woke up, he was 17. The world was angry. The world was mean. Why, the man down the street and the kid on the stoop all agreed that life stank. All the world smelled like poop. Baby poop, that is, the worst kind. So he grew his hair long and threw away his comb. And he headed back to Jerusalem to find his mom and dad and home. And when he got there, the cupboard was bare, except for an old black man with a fishing rod. He said, What you going to be when you grow up? Jesus said, God. Oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? I'm a human corkscrew, and all my wine is blood. They're going to kill me, Mama. They don't like me much, bud. So Jesus went to heaven, and he went there awful quick. All them people killed him, and he wasn't even sick. So come and gather around me, my contemporary peers, and I'll tell you the story of Jesus, the missing years. Well, I did not write that. But what that is John Prine, the great Americana songwriter, storyteller, who in 1991 wrote this song, and it's about Jesus, right? It's clearly about him, but it's about when you watch his performance in Austin City Limits. It's the Bible leaves off with Jesus as a 12-year-old and doesn't pick back up till he's about 30. And so there's this gap. And so in his mind, John Prine wanted to be creative, comical, perhaps even blasphemous when he wrote this song. He's trying to fill in the gaps, right? Well, as not true as this song is, if you listen to it, hopefully, something strange happened to you. Though this song bears very little with actual reality of those years in a Christ life, what John Prine succeeds in doing is having us realize that Jesus is one of us. Someone who can relate to us. Someone who has lived life's ups and downs, joys and pains. Well, as we celebrate Epiphany and begin the season of Epiphany this Sunday, we remember, for 4 weeks, we remember that Jesus came not just to save the world, but to reveal himself to all mankind, to all people. And for this Epiphany, we're going to look at Jesus, the man, and actually focus, just like John Prine did, though in a much more biblical and truthful way, on these missing years, Jesus' formative years, where he grew and developed. Because we're going to look at that, because we're going to look at how Jesus revealed himself to all of mankind. And the answer is found in our reading. So with that, let's revisit this story that perhaps many of us know. Maybe we sort of wrap it into the overall Christmas story, which is fine. We put our wise men out, we put our whole manger scene out. That's fine. But what I want to focus on especially is the Magi, or the Magi, as we might often call them. We don't know how many that there were. There are only 3. That we only focus on 3 because there were 3 gifts, and so it's just easier that way. But who were these people? Well, for one thing, they were not Israelites. They were not worshipers of Yahweh. They were not people of the Old Testament scriptures. They were people of what sort of, modern day Iraq, right? Modern day, back then was Persia, right? The Far East. And they were most likely priests of Zoroastrianism. Now, that's an incredibly old and ancient religion. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but as a general rule, what this faith did, what this religion did, is it took a lot of sort of theistic religion, right? So there were gods and there were demigods and there were all these things, but there was a one God. But then it combined astrology with it. And I'm sure, as you know, astrology is looking at the heavens as signs for God or the gods to tell you about what's in your future. But these were people who had heard of the Hebrew God because 600 years before the birth of Jesus, the Israelite nation was held captive by their king. So they knew the basic story, but they weren't followers. They actually didn't believe that Yahweh was even a real God. They thought he was a made-up God. So they were really against him. But then God did a spectacularly generous thing. He reached out to them in a language that they understood in order to lead them toward really what their hearts have always wanted in the first place. Gregory the Great, he was Pope from 590 to 604 AD. And when commenting on this story, he wrote this. He said that God gave the Jewish people, people who grew up in the tradition of Yahweh, who knew the stories, who read the Hebrew scriptures, that he gave them words, he gave them prophets. But to non-Jews, to Gentiles, to these people from Persia, he gave them a sign in the language that they would understand. He spoke to them in the midst of their religion. Now let me take a quick step back here. Let me tell you what God is not doing. What the story is not saying is that Zoroastrianism and Christianity are really the same religion, just with differences of some names. No. One of the things about Jesus is he's clearly saying, you've been looking for God. Well, I'm him, right? But what God does here is something incredibly powerful and generous. Is he doesn't ignore these other faiths, but he uses them to point them towards him. Now, there are multiple ways that he does that, but the one that I want to focus on is that there's a language, there's something which every single person in this world has in common, and that's being a person. You see, the way that God manifested himself to all flesh is he became flesh in the person of Jesus Christ. He took on a body that's like ours without sin. Yes, I know this is kind of a mystery, but it was still impacted by a generational sin. Bodies got tired. They wore out. They got hurt. Jesus' body got tired. Jesus knew love. Jesus knew pain. Jesus knew heartbreak. Jesus knew what it meant to be rejected. In fact, I was reading just in a preparation for this, the great medieval theologian St. Thomas Aquinas even argued that Jesus felt things more deeply. He felt physical pain more strongly. He felt emotional pain more strongly because he wasn't tainted by sin. So he felt things more raw, more in depth. So not only did he feel the same things, he felt them more than even we do. And so while that star spoke directly to people of a totally different religion and faith, Jesus himself became the ultimate star, the ultimate common language for all flesh. I'm going to remove every obstacle, God says, and I'm going to make sure that I come to you in a way which you can relate to regardless of your gender, regardless of your age, regardless of your cultural background, your skin color. I am one of you. And so for the next 3 weeks, next 4 weeks, we're going to look at how, certainly that's true in Jesus' adult life, and we see that, but I want to focus on how Jesus grew. How he learned about God, just like our children are learning about God. He learned about work. He learned about serving. Jesus had loved ones that he loved and who died, and Jesus grieved. We're going to see how this God manifested himself to all flesh. But I do have a few applications for us right now. When we look at the fact that God did what no other God in the history of the universe has ever done, he became one of us. It tells us that God, that Jesus Christ is deeply interested in you. He wants you. He's removing every obstacle that we have created between him and us. Rowan Williams, he's the former Archbishop of Canterbury, which is kind of the head of the whole Anglican world. He's a priest in England. And in 2015, he was giving a lecture on a Christmas. And the question was asked him, well, what's the point now, right? You know, we know all about the sin stuff, whatever, but why does it still matter that Jesus became flesh besides the fact that a man had to die on the cross? And Rowan Williams says this. He said, God is not indifferent. He's not sitting there waiting around for us to grab his attention by the right prayer formula or by right deeds or by doing the right thing until we wave our arms and our hearts loud enough to where he'll finally look down out of heaven and take notice of us. What the incarnation does is it says the exact opposite. It says that while we were sinners, God made himself known to us. Remember, the Magi are sinners. They are following false gods. They do not live according to God's word. They do not love Yahweh. They're not people of the covenant. But in the great irony of the scriptures, the Jewish people, especially the Jewish leadership, not the shepherds, we talked about them last week, right? Not all Jewish people, but the Jewish king, the Jewish priests who should have known, are ignoring Jesus. But the non-believers are the ones who are seeking what their hearts desired the most. And that's who Jesus made as much of a manifestation to as he did the Jewish people. So the first thing is that God is deeply interested in you and me, even though we are sinners. Once again, it's this persistent misunderstanding in our culture. It's so deeply woven in that and just this week I watched a movie called The Creator. It's a science fiction movie from last year. And it's set in sort of 2065, and AI is the big thing. And the main character, Sergeant Joshua Taylor, who's played by John David Washington, is with this new creation of AI, this human-child AI hybrid named Alpha Omega, Alfie for short. And they're having this conversation on this bus. And Alfie asks Sergeant Joshua Taylor, what is heaven and who gets there? And without missing a beat, he says, good people go to heaven. That's who gets to go there. Of course, you can imagine me, I'm watching this alone, and I'm screaming at the television, right? No, that's not true. Yes, in one sense it is true, but Jesus, the perfect one, went to heaven for us and has now come back and is going to bring us to heaven with him. Not because we've earned it, but because he loves us. Not because we've proven our worth and we've tried our hardest, but because his great love for us moves him to die, to live, and to remove every obstacle. So even we sinners can join the Magi who worship Jesus and be with him in heaven. So Jesus is deeply interested in you and in me. And our sin is not the obstacle. Well, here's my second takeaway for us. Something to think about for the rest of the week. In the same way that Jesus communicated to the Magi in a language that they understand, he's still communicating to us in terms we can understand right now. God is speaking our own language, even if we are doing things which are like what the Magi did and are worshiping things that aren't of him. Now, my idols are pretty boring idols, right? They're not really exciting idols. But one of my idols is, if you know me at all, you know I love Appalachian music. I love bluegrass music. I love old time music. I'm just sort of like the whitest guy you've ever met, right? But what's fascinating is that for so much of my life, certainly into my early adult years, I would base my value and my worth and my identity, right? If you were to say, well, who are you? I'd say, well, I'm a Southerner and I have these Scots-Irish roots and I've got these roots to Northern England and isn't all this interesting? And the Lord, in his mercy, when he began to reach out to me, when he began to manifest himself to me, guess how he did it through? My worship of my southernness, of my culture. As I began to research the roots of the Scots-Irish people and the Northern Englanders and why they moved over here, a lot of it had to do with wanting to be able to worship God. When I listened to their bluegrass music, right? I listened to these deep spiritual themes. They were hymns. I thought that they were cultural relics, but they were hymns. And so slowly but surely, the Lord began to shine the star of bluegrass music to bring me more deeply into his Son, Jesus Christ. He was haunting me. And so this day, this week, I want you to know that the Lord is speaking to you right now in the midst of wherever you are, through whatever your heart maybe has grabbed a hold of. I don't know what that is. But what I would invite you to do is prayerfully say, Lord, where are you speaking to me right now and I don't even see it? Where are you shining a star that you want me to follow you there and see who you really are? Last application. Just as Jesus was a star, you are stars too. Anybody who is a disciple of Jesus, who follows him, who puts their trust in him, we're called to be stars so that other people might see us and come to find Christ. Now, that certainly includes loving your neighbor, loving your enemy, all those things. It includes reaching out in love, just as the star shone upon the whole world. Didn't discriminate by race or class or gender. Perhaps look around your world. How can you shine where you live, work, play, and learn that people might look at you and say, they've got a joy, they have a peace, they have a hope, they have a selfless love. They're worrying about me and they've never even said anything more than just passing me in the hallway and saying hi. How is the Lord calling you to be a star in someone else's life? And this is good news for us sinners on this Epiphany. Amen.